Today we're going to be reading a short story. It's titled Thank You, Ma'am. The author is Langston Hughes. You might know Langston Hughes. He is a poet and he wrote during the Harlem Renaissance, and I know that in 5th grade you learn about the Harlem Renaissance. He's mainly known for poetry, but he does have a couple of short stories, and this is one that we're going to be reading today. Go ahead and put your name at the top of the paper and block. And since this is our first read, we're not going to be doing any highlighting. We will be doing a little bit of annotation on some of the skills we've already practiced with our earlier story, 11. And I want you to make a quick list of those skills. The first one we're going to look for is the contrast and contradiction signpost. And I'm going to abbreviate that CNC because in this story, there's a character who does show some contrast and contradictions. I also want you to list predictions. We're going to practice making a few predictions as we read this story. The third thing I want you to write down is visualize or visualizations. I'm going to ask you to visualize some details to help you better understand the story. And then the fourth thing we're going to practice is looking at the conflict in this story. As you know, every story has conflict, internal and external. So we're going to practice looking for that. So I'm just going to read, and I'm going to pause the video from time to time, and I want you to think and to annotate. We're mainly going to annotate down the right-hand margin. That's why there's extra space over here for you to put in your thinking voice. And just as a reminder, we have our thinking voice and we have the reading voice. I'm going to be your reading voice today. And then you are going to be using your thinking voice to make those annotations down the side so you can show me what you're thinking about as we're reading. And we're going to stay away from the distracting voice. All right, here we go. Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes. She was a large woman with a large purse that had everything in it but a hammer and nails. It had a long strap, and she carried it slung across her shoulder. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and she was walking alone when a boy ran up behind her and tried to snatch her purse. The strap broke with a single tug the boy gave it from behind, but the boy's weight and the weight of the purse combined caused him to lose his balance, so instead of taking off full blast as he had hoped, the boy fell on his back on the sidewalk and his legs flew up. The large woman simply turned around and kicked him right square in his blue jean sitter. Then she reached down, picked the boy up by his shirt front, and shook him until his teeth rattled. All right, I'm going to stop there for just a second. I want to point out to you, and I want you to make like a little arrow without a tail up here at the corner of that paragraph, and I want you to label this hook. Now, when authors write their first lines, it may be the first paragraph, as it is in this story, that's called the hook, and their goal is to try to hook your attention, to hook you as a reader. And I think Langston Hughes has done a really good job with this story. He started out right in the middle of this conflict, this action that's happening. Also, at the end of this paragraph, you've got this woman who's walking home from work. It's the middle of the night. She's being robbed. She turns around and she becomes the aggressor. She kicks him in his rear and she picks him up by his shirt and she rattles him until his teeth are rattling. Sorry, she shakes him until his teeth rattle. This is kind of a surprise, isn't it? Normally, victims don't act this way. What kind of signpost is that when a character acts in a surprise way or a way you wouldn't expect? I hope that you're thinking the CNC signpost, the contrast and contradiction. This is definitely a surprise, the way she's acting. And underneath that, I want you to write what the essential question is. And if you need to look up on the poster in the classroom, in the brown box, you can copy it there. I'm going to write it here. I'm going to put, why is she acting this way? There's a reason why. We don't know yet, but she is acting in this kind of surprising way the night that she is being robbed. So just kind of keep that question in your head, and as we continue reading, we'll come back to that question at the end and see if we can't find the answer to it. All right, moving forward. After that, the woman said, "Pick up my pocketbook, boy, and give it here." She still held him, but she bent down enough to permit him to stoop and pick up her purse. And then she said, "Now, ain't you ashamed of yourself?" Firmly gripped by his shirt front, the boy said, "Yes'm." The woman said, "What did you want to do it for?" The boy said, "I didn't aim to." She said, "You a lie." I didn't aim to, by the way, it means I didn't mean to. And she says, "You're lying." By that time, 2 or 3 people passed, stopped, turned to look, and some stood watching. "If I turn you loose, will you run?" asked the woman. "Yes'm," said the boy. "Well, then I won't turn you loose," said the woman. She did not release him. "I'm very sorry, lady. I'm sorry," whispered the boy. "Uh-huh. And your face is dirty. I got a great mind to wash your face for you. Ain't you got nobody home to tell you to wash your face? Now stop. Don't turn the page. I want you, just based on what we've read so far, I want you to make a prediction. So write the word prediction. And I want you to tell me what you think is going to happen. I think, and I want you to complete that statement. I'm going to pause and let you think. Use your thinking voice, and I want you to predict what's going to happen. All right, moving on. So remember, she says, "Is there no one home for to wash your face?" He says, "No, ma'am," said the boy. "Then it will get washed this evening," said the large woman, starting up the street, dragging the frightened boy behind her. Pause for a second. I want you to write the word conflict in the margin. And I want you to tell me what type of conflict is happening right now in the story. Remember, it starts out as character versus, and I want you to finish that. All right, we're going to keep going. "He looked as if he were 14 or 15, frail and willow wild, in tennis shoes and blue jeans." Frail means weak. I do want you to write the word weak next to it. That's what frail means. Willow wild is an interesting adjective. Willow is actually a type of tree. And I'm going to do a little visualization. You can draw with me. So I'm going to draw a tree trunk, and then I'm going to draw these long branches that all come down to the ground. They're very thin and bendable. You may even have a willow tree in your yard or your neighborhood. I know that doesn't look too much like a tree, but I promise you it's my version of a willow tree, okay? I want to point out to you the branches, the willow branches. They're very, they're very bendable. So if he's being compared to a willow tree, it would be those thin branches. So the author's describing him as weak and thin. Think about the inference you can make about Roger. We don't know his name is Roger yet, but the boy, the fact that he's weak and thin, and he says nobody's at home. So let's make a quick inference about Roger. I'm going to tell you his name is Roger. Tell me something that you can make. What conclusion can you make based on these descriptions? He's dirty. He's out stealing at night. He's weak and thin. Nobody's at home. Go ahead and tell me what you think. I'm going to pause the video and then we'll keep going. The woman said, "You ought to be my son. I would teach you right from wrong. Least I can do right now is wash your face. Are you hungry?" "No, ma'am," said the bean-dragged boy. "I just want you to turn me loose." "Was I bothering you when I turned that corner?" asked the woman. "No, ma'am." But you put yourself in contact with me, said the woman. If you think that contact is not going to last a while, you've got another thought coming. When I get through with you, sir, you are going to remember Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. I just love it when she uses all of the names and she doesn't just call herself Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, just like a formal introduction. Sweat popped out on the boy's face and he began to struggle. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second. Sweat popped out on the boy's face. Let's circle that. And I'm going to draw a little arrow over to the margin. I want you to tell me what type of conflict can you make an inference? Character versus blank. Based on how he's being described here. Sweat popped out on the boy's face. I'm going to pause the video. Mrs. Jones stopped, jerked him around in front of her, put a half Nelson about his neck, that's a wrestling move, by the way, and continued to drag him up the street. When she got to her door, she dragged the boy inside, down a hall, and into a large kitchenette furnished room at the rear of the house. So she lives in a home where it's a house, but she just rents out one room of the house. She switched on the light and left the door open. That's interesting. She left the door open. She didn't lock him inside. The boy could hear other roomers laughing and talking in the large house. Some of the doors were open, too, so he knew he and the woman were not alone. The woman still had him by the neck in the middle of the room. She said, "What's your name?" "Roger," answered the boy. "Then, Roger, you go to that sink and wash your face," said the woman, whereupon she turned him loose at last. Roger looked at the door, looked at the woman, looked at the door, and went to the sink. Interesting. He could have run up the door because she left the door open and he was making a decision. He looked at the woman, looked at the door again, and then he decided to stay. So I want to write a thick question here. Thick. I'm going to put Q for question. And I want you to start with why. Okay, ask a question based on this right here. Why? Any question you can think of that pertains to the story right here about Roger. I'm going to pause the video and we'll keep going. "Let the water run until it gets warm," she says. "Here's a clean towel." "Are you going to take me to jail?" asked the boy, bending over the sink. "Not with that face. I would not take you nowhere," said the woman. "Here I am, trying to get home to cook me a bite to eat, and you snatch my pocketbook. Maybe you ain't been to your supper either, late as it is, have you?" "There's nobody at home at my house," said the boy. "Then we'll eat," said the woman. "I believe you're hungry, or been hungry, to try to snatch my pocketbook." "I wanted a pair of blue suede shoes," said the boy. "Well, you didn't have to snatch my pocketbook to get some suede shoes," said Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. "You could have asked me." "Ma'am?" Let's pause here for a second. Let's think about the contrast and contradiction signpost. She's telling him that you could have just walked up to me and asked me for money to buy shoes. That's kind of a surprising thing to say. Most people don't want people coming up to them saying, "I need money to go buy shoes." That's kind of an unusual thing, and she's an unusual person. So contrast and contradiction, let's ask the question, why is she acting this way? We still don't know why. She's definitely acting in an unusual, surprising way. We haven't figured out why quite yet, but we're going to. Let's keep going. The water dripping from his face, the boy looked at her. There was a long pause, a very long pause. So a very long pause means he's thinking. He's thinking about what she's saying. After he dried his face and not knowing what else to do, dried it again, the boy turned around wondering what next. The door was open. He could make a dash for it down the hall. He could run, 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 run. The woman was sitting on the daybed. After a while, she said, I were young once, and I wanted things I could not get. There was another long pause. The boy's mouth opened. So that you can make an inference. He's still thinking. He's still thinking about what she's saying. And his mouth opened like he realized something. Then he frowned, but not knowing he frowned. The woman said, You thought I was going to say, but, didn't you? You thought I was going to say, but I didn't snatch people's pocketbooks. Well, I wasn't going to say that. Pause. Silence. I have done things too, which I would not tell you, son, neither tell God, if he didn't already know. So you sit down while I fix us something to eat. You might run a comb through your hair so you'll look presentable. All right, this is a very important part of the story. I'm going to underline, she says, you thought I was going to say, but. You thought I was going to say, but I didn't snatch people's pocketbooks. Well, I wasn't going to say that. So she just made a confession to him. Okay? She confessed that she used to steal people's pocketbooks. So do you see how this might connect to this? Why she's taking him home, why she's feeding him and having him wash up because he stole her purse or pocketbook. I want you to write right here the answer to this question. Why is she acting this way now that you know that she used to steal people's pocketbooks? I want you to write your answer here. I'll pause the video. In another corner of the room behind a screen was a gas plate and an ice box. An ice box is a refrigerator that doesn't plug in. It just like uses ice. It's like a cooler. And all these clues are telling you if a gas plate is not a real stove, it's just like a little one burner. She doesn't have a lot of money herself, okay? And so what she's doing here is even more remarkable because she herself doesn't have a lot of money. Mrs. Jones got up and went behind the screen. The woman did not watch the boy to see if he was going to run now, nor did she watch her purse. She's testing him, which she left behind on the daybed. But the boy took care to sit on the far side of the room, where he thought she could easily see him out of the corner of her other eye, if she wanted to. He did not trust the woman not to trust him, and he did not want to be mistrusted now. My question here is a thick question. Who did Roger not trust? I want you to think about that. He did not trust the woman not to trust him, and he did not want to be mistrusted now. I'm going to pause the video. I want you to think about that. Do you need somebody to go to the store? Asked the boy. Maybe to get some milk or something? I don't believe I do, said the woman, unless you want to get some sweet milk for yourself. I was going to make cocoa out of this canned milk I got here. Oh, that'll be fine, said the boy. She heated some lima beans and ham she had in the icebox, made the cocoa, and set the table. The woman did not ask the boy anything about where he lived, or his folks, or anything else that would embarrass him. Instead, as they ate, she told him about her job in a hotel beauty shop that stayed open late, what the work was like, and how all kinds of women came in and out, blondes, redheads, and Spanish. Then she cut him a half of her 10-cent cake. Eat some more, son, she said. I think it's interesting. See what she did there? She called him son. I want you to make an inference. Okay? Why do you think she called him son? I'm going to let you write your answer right here. When they were finished eating, she got up and said, "Now here, take this $10 and buy yourself some blue suede shoes. And next time, do not make the mistake of latching onto my pocketbook nor nobody else's, because shoes come by devilish ways like that will burn your feet. I got to get my rest now, but I wish you would behave yourself, son." There, she said it again. From here on in. She led him down the hall to the front door and opened it. "Good night. Behave yourself, boy," she said, looking out into the street. The boy wanted to say something else other than "Thank you, ma'am," to Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, but he couldn't do so as he turned at the barren stoop and looked back at the large woman in the door. He barely managed to say "Thank you" before she shut the door, and he never saw her again. All right, I want you to write one more thick question that you have. You can start with why or how, okay? And I want you to write it there, and when you're finished with your thick question, I want you to turn your paper over and raise your hand, and I will come by and take a look.